if you do any of these things for him and I find out, then our time together is finished. I said, I'm not going to work with him. And she said, okay. And so she said she went back to the hotel, and she said that night, he said, Mom, what time is session tomorrow? And she said, I don't know. Look it up. And then he said, well, Mom, it looks like we start at 9 tomorrow. So what time will we have to get breakfast? And she said, I don't know. What do you think? And he said, well, it looks like we'll have to have breakfast by 7. He said, well, how long will it take us to get there? She said, I don't know. Google it. She said that it was such a great lesson for her because she didn't realize how much she had just been doing for him out of love.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Dr. Tere Linzey, who helps people improve their brain functions. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's quote comes from Thomas Edison. Many of life's failures are people who didn't realize how close they were to success when they gave up. That's gotta suck. Imagine getting so close to success and giving up because you didn't realize that it was right around the corner. That's why sometimes we just gotta keep going. Hey, I wanted to take a moment and just let you know how this show is produced, edited, and comes out. And part of that is because of the times that we're in and how topical certain things take place. I record my shows weeks to months in advance. So right now, we're about 10 to 12 weeks out in production. So something that this new episode, if you're just listening to it as it was released, it was actually recorded 3 months ago. And as we all know, the world has drastically changed. And yet these contents and the subjects of our episodes are evergreen. And what that means is that an episode from 2 years ago should just be just as relevant today as it was 2 years ago. The intros and the outros that I do, they're usually done somewhere between 2 to 5 weeks before an episode goes live. So they also are behind. I do all the recording. I upload it. I have an editor, and that's why some of this takes longer. His name is Simeon. Simeon's 14, and he's been doing this since the show started 2.5 years ago, and he lives on the other side of the country from me, and I actually got to finally meet him in person recently, and it's amazing because now he's taller than I am. His dad was back on the show back in episode 16 with Jonathan Harris, and he's got 8 brothers and sisters who are also homeschooled, and his parents run a business out of their house. And I'm telling you this because we can figure out how to make all these things work together. Many of you may now find yourself in this situation, and it may be new for you, but for many of us, this is just normal everyday life. I work out of the house. My wife a lot of times works out of the house. The kids do homeschooling out of the house and distance learning. And so what's new for you is normal for many other people in the world. And by the way, Simeon ensures that I and my guests sound amazing. So thank you so much for that. All right, last week's action step was to spend the time to think about December 31st, 2020, and what do you want to celebrate? There's still a long time left in this year, and you've got to ask yourself, where are you going? I know at this point, you may no longer be thinking about this because your life has been disrupted. The best thing you can do is stop and breathe and think. So take a moment. In spite of everything that's going on, how do you want your year to end up? And I say this is because you really don't want to be in the drift when you're in turbulent times. Get clarity. Ask for help if you need it. You'd be shocked at how many people are willing to support you. Today, we have a timely topic on educating kids. And while our focus is on kids today, these same principles apply to us as adults. So pay attention, because as we age, we lose practice, and maybe we should all go back to practice. Our guest today is Dr. Tere Linzey, who is a licensed educational psychologist and the founder of Brain Matters, a program meant to improve auditory processing, executive functioning skills, attention, focus, and memory in youths. Dr. Linzey specializes in brain optimization, or the practice of training one's brain to develop optimal fundamental skills that are necessary for learning. Dr. Linzey is certified in neuropsychology and holds 3 additional master's degrees. She's researched brain potential and cognition in a number of top universities, including Harvard and UC Berkeley. Though Dr. Linzey has been in education for 30 plus years, it was during her time at UC Berkeley that she became fascinated with brain science discoveries and the ability to reshape and alter cognitive functions. Based on extensive research, she developed her own comprehensive program designed to optimize brain function. Her results are remarkable in helping students at all levels improve test-taking skills, executive functioning, and increase processing speed. Her work has been proven so vastly to improve issues surrounding dyslexia, concussions, and ADHD. As a result, students feel more confident and empowered. She works across the United States, India, and China. And she's got a new book out that we're going to talk about. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Dr. Tere Linzey. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much.
And I'm excited to learn from you today. So we always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma, and what I learned about money was that you needed to work hard if you were going to get it. And, parents had a great work ethic. So I learned about that piece of it. I wish I would have learned in school about the working smarter part too, but had to wait until later to get that.
And that's true. They don't always teach us these things in school, do they?
No, they don't.
No, they don't. And that's going to be a big part of what we talk about today is what they do teach us in school and how to kind of help improve that whole situation.
Okay.
So you got started as a basketball coach, correct?
Yes, I did. Growing up in Oklahoma, basketball is only second to football, women's basketball. So it's serious business there. And not only that, I grew up playing basketball for Bobby Knight's wife, and then attended a lot of his camps later. So his wife is a good friend of mine. So I grew up in that atmosphere where basketball was definitely serious business.
And that sounds like it. And it sounds like you were connected to people who are in the seriousness of that business from a coaching standpoint.
I was, and I feel really grateful that I had those opportunities to learn from them, especially about making the practice tougher than the game and how to help students. They were helping me at the time, but then how to turn around and help students give back. So I think those were important lessons for me, and I'm grateful for those.
So can you dig into that a little bit more? What do you mean by helping students learn to give back?
Well, I think that, when coaches work with you and teach you things about sport, those lessons then bleed into life, right? And so if you're able to be disciplined on the court and set your goals and move in a certain direction, then that's what you want, right? So I think later on, once you have good coaches that teach you that, then I think it's important then to pass that along to students along the way. And so Bobby Knight would always say, you have to be a student of the game. And so that was a really important lesson for me, to be a student of the game. And then his wife, Karen, would always say, and then you need to take that and give back.
So it's more than just the game, and it's more than just winning, and it's understanding how things work. It's kind of, you're learning how to live life and how to be a great adult.
Yes. And especially with basketball, we'd make the analogy that basketball is an inside game, because you're going to take those high percentage shots inside. But life is also an inside game too. You've got to make sure that your insides are healthy and positive and those kinds of things, so that the outside reflects that.
And that's very true. It's very much of a mindset game. I coached in soccer, and I would always tell the kids, and they'd never seem to understand it. I'm like, more than half of this game is mindset. And if you don't have your mindset right, and you're not ready emotionally for the game, and you're not using a lot of the different kind of mindset tricks that are out there, or tips to improve yourself, I don't care how good your skills are with the ball, you're never going to win. And
that's exactly right.
It was a constant struggle back and forth. And I think if you get time to work with kids over time, multiple seasons, they start to get it. Because once they start to see the results, then they're much more willing to follow along and do the harder work that's required to have tremendous success.
Absolutely. And so we either have the pain of discipline, or we have the pain of regret, and is what I used to talk to my students about. And they definitely would much rather go through the discipline piece of it than the regret.
And I think my last year of coaching, the kids probably went through the regret, because we talked up front. I'm like, do you want to have fun, or do you want to win games? And they're like, we want to have fun. I go, you realize winning games is fun. And if you're not willing to do the work, you're not going to have fun losing. And I think that was an important lesson for some of them to learn.
I bet it was. Yeah.
So how did sports coaching lead you to become an educational psychologist?
Well, so when I was coaching, I would say that I was a really good fundamentals coach. I could look at my players and see what fundamental skills they were lacking, and then design drills that would then improve each of their fundamental skills. So let's say they didn't shoot free throws well, or they weren't good at shooting jump shots or things like that. Then I would design drills for that. Well, then when I went to Kate School as the director of counseling, Kate School is in Santa Barbara, and I coached their basketball team, and the team, I guess, hadn't won any games about 3 years in a row. And then I came in and coached the team and just worked fundamentals the entire time right up to the first game. And the kids really, really loved it and did really well, and went on to win their league and win CIF. And so the headmaster said to me, can you do what you just did with that basketball team with academics? And I said, well, I don't know. What do you mean? And he said, well, if we send you to Harvard and Stanford and all these places that are working on this new brain research, can you take a look at it and see what you can do and bring something back? So when I found out that brains and muscles train exactly the same, I thought, oh gosh, this is going to be great. So I took all that brain research that wasn't being used. I designed these drills, and then we funneled kids through it at Kate, just kind of piloted it until we saw what was working. And then a few years later had our clinical trials and saw that it was actually working and actually changing the structure of the brain. So it was very much like coaching. It's still being I always joke and say, here's how I went from being a head coach to a head coach. It's very similar, and it's really fun.
So you said something interesting. Can you explain that? When you say our brain and our muscles work the same, what does that mean?
Well, now that we know that neuroplasticity is in effect, what that means is what we practice is what we hardwire, right? So the same with athletes, right? If let's say in tennis, you need a forehand, a backhand, and a serve. So you're going to have to practice a forehand over and over and over again to get it where it needs to be, right? Well, with neuroplasticity, we know that everything in the brain is practice, okay? And so that's the good news and the bad news, Rocky. If you're practicing the things that are going to move you in the direction of your goals, then you're going to hardwire the right things. But if you're practicing things that are taking you away from your goals, then you're going to hardwire the wrong things. So, if you want to, be great at chemistry, but you're playing 6 hours of video games, you're not hardwiring the right things. So that's the same with muscles, the practice. And I know a lot of people make it look easy later on after they've practiced diligently for many years, but everything in the brain is practice.
And that it is. You mentioned neuroplasticity. Can you explain what that is?
Well, that's the brain's ability to change as a result of its experiences. Okay. So again, the simple term of that is what we practice is what we hardwire.
And is that where the myelin sheeting comes in?
Exactly.
Okay.
The more you practice, the more the myelin wraps around, and that's what we want. We want more of that.
And it's basically creating a conduit in a hardwired path so that when you do something, you no longer have to think about it, right? It's just automatic. Like, I don't have to think about how I brush my teeth in the morning. I don't even remember doing it half the time because it's literally been hardwired into me.
Exactly.
And we can hardwire a lot more than just, I guess, routine, mundane tasks like that.
Yes, absolutely.
So now I've heard on the sports training side, because it's the same thing, right? You learn, as you talked about your forehand and your backhand. I've heard that if you have slight imperfections in your training, meaning that it's not always exactly the same, that the ball doesn't always react the same way, it helps to even improve that hard wiring and allow it to deal with life's imperfections, I guess. Have you researched anything in that particular area?
Well, I think that kind of goes in with the making the practice harder than the game kind of thing. So you want to set up drills first where they get the fundamentals under their belt, so to speak, right? Then you need to set up distractions and, as you said, things that they wouldn't expect, so that then they can take that fundamental skill and use it in those different situations. And at Brain Matters in brain training, we call that making the practice tougher than the game.
And we're coming back to that fundamental again. And, just to make this simple for people, I mean, most of us know how to drive a car, right? And if you think about these days, because I've got teenagers and I know how nerve-wracking it was teaching them to drive. But for us as adults, it really doesn't take much thought because we've kind of hardwired it. And we've dealt with the longer you drive, the more imperfections you're used to dealing with on the road and things coming out of nowhere that you just automatically begin to handle it. And we're just taking these same concepts and just applying it to different areas in education, I guess.
Yes, and the more experience, then the easier you can seamlessly transition through any of those obstacles.
So are we teaching students how to do this for their brains so that they can perform better in the classroom?
Well, we are at Brain Matters. I'm not so certain that we're doing this in the classroom all the time. Certainly, you have to change the brain chemically before you can change the brain structurally. So I think that's an important piece of it. And in other words, you need to change the brain chemically to get buy-in from students. They need to know why we're doing this and why this is important. And little things like gratitude can change the brain chemically. Something called power poses changes the brain structurally. So there's chemically. So there's a lot of changing the brain chemically first, just like an athletic team warms up to certain songs that get them ready to play, right? They go into pregame and they get ready to play. Well, basically you're changing the brain chemically there with music and environmental changes to prepare them to then, do the task at hand or the performance.
And I just want to clarify so that people are clear. We're not talking about administering drugs. We're not talking about external chemicals. You're talking about naturally made chemicals that our body creates, correct?
Absolutely. We're changing those chemicals in the brain by things like meditation and gratitude and power poses. And the body sends messages to the brain, and then the brain sends messages back to the body. So, those are the kinds of things that we're doing to then change the brain structurally.
So what chemicals are we trying to create or have induced in the brain?
Well, there are many. It's kind of, that's probably an entire podcast there, but dopamine, serotonin, those are the chemicals basically that we're dealing with, epinephrine. So, we're each one does something different. And again, that would be an entire new podcast. But, when we're doing it with Brain Matters, we're doing it, quickly, and the students don't always know how we're changing their brain. They're just having fun. We want the amygdala to be wide open, which there are a couple times when the amygdala is wide open that we know of. And one of them is definitely when kids are having fun. So, those are the kinds of changes that we start with to then get buy-in from our students.
So creating an atmosphere that's fun, which is probably different than most classrooms, opens up the amygdala. And what is the purpose of the amygdala in the brain?
Well, it responds to, it's going to respond to the feeling part of the brain, right? And so it's going to get you ready. And then there are other things that the amygdala does, but we want to come in from that positive place of opening that up so that they can then learn. Okay.
So let's take a step back. We're here today because you wrote a book, and the book is called Measuring Up: The Go-To Guide for Parents and Students Looking for an Edge in a Hyper-Competitive World of Education. So why did you write the book?
So I wrote the book. I was working. I have a private practice as a licensed educational psychologist. During the time, I was also being a psychologist in public schools, and when parents would come to my private practice, they had all these questions about how to navigate public or private education. They just, as you can imagine, it's so difficult for parents to navigate it. And so who should be testing my student or my child? When should I get testing? Is there anything out there that helps after testing? What's special ed? What's, all of these things. And a lot of the parents would come in after they'd already paid $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 for someone to do some testing that wasn't qualified, or, all of these things. And so I thought, what, if I just get a book out there to parents and let them read this is going to help them. And so that's why in the book I'm listing who should be testing your child, and for what, and when should you be, when should that testing take place, and why, and and then after that, what kind of interventions can come into play. And I wanted them to know that nothing has to be wrong with their child for them to give them every advantage. They can do the brain training, and maybe there's nothing going on, no concerns, but maybe they just want to make them, give them every possibility or every advantage. I call us the ethical alternative.
So I guess this begs the question, is it worth it to even get into this hyper competitive game, or is it better to just kind of teach your kids in a different way? Because I don't know that the outcomes of school are necessarily great, in the sense that, we started this thing asking about money. Well, we go to K through 12 to get a good primary education, to go to college, to get a job, to make money. And yet nobody teaches you about it. Is it worth it to get into the hyper competition? Or maybe is there a better way to just educate our kids?
I think that just depends on each individual and their families, and what direction the student wants to go, what they're passionate about, what they enjoy. So I think the ultimate goal is that we want learning to be fun, and we want them to end up being lifetime learners, right? Whatever course of, or subject area or profession they're going to go in. I think that's the whole point. And I tell parents all the time, we tell kids they have to be good at everything. Right? Reading, writing, math, sports. We tell them they need to be good at everything. But the bottom line is, as adults, we all move in the direction of our strengths eventually, every one of us. And so I tell students, we want to do the brain training so that you have all these choices to then make a decision based on choice. You had all these different directions you could go, and then you go in that direction. But, I think the ultimately we want our children to just enjoy learning and pick up a book and maybe read it for pleasure, or research something just because they're passionate about it. I think that's the ultimate goal.
And I very much agree with you. And that was our goal with our kids. But what I have found, and statistics prove it, that once people get out of college, the amount of people who pick up a book out of college is abysmal. People don't read and learn. Well,
I can't argue with you there. I still do, and I see a lot of the kids come through that. I think that's one of the things that parents say to me the most after they go through the Brain Matters program, is they'll say, "Oh my gosh, he came home and just picked up the newspaper and started reading," or he came home and picked up a book in his room. We were just shocked. So I know you're right. I know that is true, sadly.
So what changes from the training that causes a kid to just go home and do that differently?
Well, if let's say we're working on visual processing speed, and visual processing speed being slow is a huge issue these days. I mean, it's everywhere. Every kid I test, it's like high verbal, and then visual processing speed is average or below. So I'm not sure what it is. I'm not sure if it's screen time or whatever it is, but visual processing speed is required to be a good reader. And so if visual processing speed is slow, then reading is hard. And no one wants to do something that's hard. So when you go through the Brain Matters program and we're working visual processing speed, we not only speed that up for them, we make it easier for them to pay attention to details. So when that happens and they come home, I'll tell them about the fourth or fifth day, I'll say, of the brain labs, I'll say, tonight when you go home, just pick up something, anything in the house and read it, anything that's not on a screen, and see how it feels, and come back tomorrow and tell me how it feels. And they always do. And they'll say, well, what am I supposed to feel? And I'll say, no, I'm not going to put any words in your mouth. I want to know how it feels. And about probably 95% of them come back and say, well, it was easier, or they'll say it was smoother, or I read much faster, or I could understand what I read, those kinds of things. So no one wants to do anything that's hard, that's a lot of work.
So how would you know if you had a problem with visual processing speed?
Oh, there's lots of ways. First of all, they rarely read for pleasure. When they sit down to test take, sometimes they'll say, I knew all the questions, but I couldn't read fast enough to get through the test, especially if it's a time test. That's why we get so many students that come right before the SAT or the ACTs, because if they don't get extra time, then they can't perform up to potential if their visual processing speed is slower, because they can't read the questions fast enough to get through the tests. So, but those two things, they don't read for pleasure, and also they don't test take well, or sometimes they'll say, I sit down to take a test and everything I studied was just gone. It's like it just evaporated. So there's a lot of signs, to tell, but those are the main ones.
And in today's world, unfortunately, in the college money game, high ACT and high SAT scores are what drive your scholarships on the merit side. So having that little bit of extra effort definitely pays off. What types of things would you do then to improve their visual processing speed?
Well, again, drills. We do drills just like an athlete would do. So we have something called brain cards. And in the brain cards, they have to hold a large group of cards in their hand. And on these cards, Rocky, there are 6 shapes, 6 colors, 6 numbers, 6 letters. And they hold those cards in their unnatural hand face up, and then I will start them all at the same time. And they have to categorize those cards as quickly as they can, first into colors, and then we shuffle them and then come back and do them into shapes, and then into numbers, or we call digits, okay? And then we go into some that work with executive functioning as well. So that's card categorization. That research has been out there for many, many years, that helps with visual processing speed, because obviously you've got to see the card and put it down as quickly as you can. In fact, I do mine every morning. I do my brain cards. And I think there are a lot of professional football players out there, especially some quarterbacks, that do brain cards on a daily basis. But that's one of them. And the others would be pencil to paper, because you must do the thing that you want to get better at. So if test taking is pencil to paper, and reading is, reading from a book, then we have to practice it that way to then be better at it. So that's why the online brain training doesn't work as well, because it doesn't transfer into the classroom, and we're still doing pencil to paper in our classrooms.
And that's very true. And I've heard from a writing standpoint that there's some sort of natural thing that pencil to paper does, as far as helping kind of the brain connect with the information, and that it's different than typing even. And that it's a very different type of connection.
Very different. It helps with retention. Just a number of things.
And so pushing for digital learning may not be the wisest decision in schools.
You're backing me in a spot here, Rocky.
You don't have to answer. I will say that. Is that okay?
Well, I think our kids are trapped in between. I think there's a part digital and part pencil and paper. And so they've got to be prepared. We have to prepare them for both. We can't just prepare them for digital when they're still in that in-between world, right? They're still doing both.
You are still doing both, but, and maybe this is incorrect. My kids went to a school where you literally started Cursive in kindergarten, and they kept on Cursive all the way through. And studies have shown that kids, especially when they used to have the writing part on the SATs, the kids who had learned Cursive could get through that and did better. While we are going more to a digital world, just the thought of handwriting, especially for people who write books or do that, they say it's a very different process. And I guess it's probably different for everybody, but I don't see pen and paper disappearing. So you kind of have to learn both. I would think it's easier to go from pen and paper to digital than it is to go from digital to pen and paper, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think you're absolutely right. When students come to me to go through our executive functioning course, I make them all bring an old school day planner into the class, because if they can't do it in an old school day planner, if they can't schedule their time and do all of those kind of executive functionings, if they can't do it in an old school day planner, they certainly won't be able to do it on their phone.
And it's funny, it's kind of like when I grew up, the cash register was, it's been around forever, but people used to know how to count change before.
Yes.
And then the cash register came along, and that was always the big argument. Nobody knows how to count change anymore. And it's like, this isn't difficult, but it's kind of funny. So you mentioned executive function. What do you mean by that?
So those are those skills that are in the frontal lobe, and they don't usually mature until the late 20s, but we know that we can expedite that now. So things that would be considered executive functioning would be organization, time management, problem solving, those kinds of things. So being able to know that if I have this test coming up on this day, that I need to do these things, and how much time do I need to study, and how can I manage my time along the way, and how do I need to organize my notes in order to prepare for that, those kinds of things. Those executive functioning skills are really a buzzword out there now in the schools. Students really are struggling with that. And I'm getting a lot of college students that go away their first year of college and find that mom's not there anymore. No one's there to do the things for them that have been done before. And now they're having to do them themselves. And so and it's great when parents are involved like that, but we don't want to be overly involved, because then that keeps the frontal lobe from developing. If students don't have to do those things for themselves, then they don't develop the skill, and the frontal lobe doesn't develop.
As a business owner, you love what you do. It's why you started your business. However, the business of business causes you stress and anxiety and keeps you up late at night. Welcome to the club. Over 80% of business owners hate the business part of running a business. It doesn't have to be that way. No, you don't have to learn how to read complicated financial statements. We create systems that run in the background, and I implement the systems in conjunction with your bookkeeper and accountant, analyze the information, and bring you better questions on how to run your business. It's a lot less expensive than you think to have a service like this, and not having it is why so many business owners struggle with money. The outcome is you can focus on what you love in your business, knowing that your finances are in order. Your business becomes more valuable, and banks are standing in line to provide working capital. You get to sleep at night. Learn more by listening to episode 163 with Mike Michalowicz as we discuss the process, or go to profitcomesfirst.com. Want to cut to the chase? There's a link in the show notes for a 15-minute no-obligation call to see if this makes sense for you. Schedule now and get your business on a rock-solid foundation. So out of curiosity, I don't know if you know the history of this. Is this more modern day that this function doesn't develop until the late 20s, or is that historically true that it didn't happen until the late 20s?
Well, it's been probably 20 years, 25 years since I've gone through my psych classes, and they were saying it then, Rocky. They were saying that the frontal lobe didn't develop. They used to say that frontal lobe would develop around 25. Now they're pushing it back a little bit to 28, 29. So that might just be a sign of the times. I don't know.
And it's funny because these are the conversations when my daughter comes home from college. She's like, these kids don't know how to do anything. They don't know how to plan. They don't know how to. And she's very good at that because we just expected it of them. It was what was taught to them as kids. Hey, you got to get all this stuff done and you only have so much time. So let's work backward and figure it out. So I know you help kids train for this. So how do you help them train for executive function?
Well, we have a program that they go through. It's a 5-day program. They come in 4 hours a day. And like I said, the first thing they have to do is bring in an old school day planner. I sit down with the parents and we have a conversation about what I'm going to be doing with their student and how I don't want them doing any of these things for this student anymore. And it's funny because I had one parent fly in from a different state, and I said to her, they were staying at the same hotel and coming back and forth to my office up in Carmel at the time. And I told the mom, I said, now, here's the thing. I said, he's going to be getting a list of assignments this week that he's going to be working on. He's going to be having to put in scheduling for his up and coming year in this day planner. I said, if you do any of these things for him and I find out, then our time together is finished. I said, I'm not going to work with him. And she said, okay. And so she said she went back to the hotel and she said that night, he said, Mom, what time is session tomorrow? And she said, I don't know. Look it up. And he said, well, Mom, it looks like we start at 9 tomorrow. So what time will we have to get breakfast? And she said, I don't know. What do you think? And he said, well, it looks like we'll have to have breakfast by 7. He said, well, how long will it take us to get there? She said, I don't know. Google it. And she said that it was such a great lesson for her because she didn't realize how much she had just been doing for him out of love.
And that's true. You do it out of love, but that's not necessary. While you're doing it out of love, you're really hurting the kid.
Doing a disservice. That's right. And so that was the biggest lesson for her. And then when she got that lesson, then he realized, oh gosh, hey, I'm on my own here. Mom gets it now. So now I have to, do what I need to do. And so he did. And it was great because he sent me his graduation what do you call that when they go through the graduation ceremony? But he sent that to me with a thank you after he graduated from college.
Oh, that's nice. It's always nice to be acknowledged for the help that you provided.
It is.
So having teenagers, there's always the whole issue of emotions. So do you do anything with emotional control?
Well, we do. The timing piece of it is a trigger for a lot of kids, being timed, right? And so there's a lot of anxiety around being timed. So we desensitize them to that because everything in the Brain Matters program is timed. And so we desensitize them to being timed. And then once they are fine being timed, then we add another level of distraction that would typically cause them more anxiety, right? Not just enough to push them out of their comfort zone, but not too much to push them over the edge. And so there's that fine line. So we are working with their emotions. Now, a lot of the things that we do in the program are around growth mindset, and we're kind of weaving those kinds of things in, which do affect their emotions. We'll say mistakes are a huge part of success, or, make sure you're paddling your own canoe, or, just different things we're weaving in for them to gain some confidence. A lot of the kids come through the program, and it doesn't matter how smart they are. A lot of them come in and they have a lack of confidence or some anxiety or that emotional piece of it. So when they leave, we want them to be confident. We want them to be desensitized to, that anxiety of test taking or performing as much as we possibly can. And we want them to realize that they did this on their own. They did this program. They went through it. They made these improvements. And that alone brings about a lot of confidence when it comes to their emotions regarding learning and those kinds of things.
So I'm guessing you're not playing the Jeopardy music then?
No.
A little over the edge. Yeah, I know that gives adults, when they're sitting there thinking and that starts in the background, it causes people to freak out. So you mentioned the concept of open mindset. Can you...
Growth mindset? In a growth mindset, students realize that if they work diligently and move in a certain direction, that they're really not failing. They're really just, if they make a mistake, they understand that the brain takes that mistake and says, really holds on to the good piece so that they move on and don't make that mistake again. And so what growth mindset says is that it's not about being smart. It's about working diligently and moving in the direction of your goals. And then being happy for everyone around you that is also moving in the direction of their goals. With a growth mindset, you're moving towards success. You're not a success or a failure with growth mindset.
And I'm sure you've read Carol Dweck's book and her information on mindset. And I just remind parents, I think that's a great book for parents to read, because the words you use to talk to your kids, especially when they're young, can put them into that growth mindset or fixed mindset. And part of it is just saying to the kid, oh, you're so smart. You think you're helping and loving, but you're not. You're actually causing harm because you're putting them into a fixed mindset. And then they have that anxiety and fear because they don't want to be stupid. So they're not willing to take the risk. They're not willing to fail, and failure is where we learn. So I always recommend parents to check that out so that they can watch the language that they use with kids.
Absolutely. And it's so important. So very important.
So you also work with a lot of kids who have certain issues like dyslexia, concussions, ADHD. How does this help those types of students?
Well, the first thing that has to happen is I have to have a cognitive assessment for them. That's that 45-minute, say, WISC-5. That gives so much information. In fact, I say to parents all the time, if you don't do anything else, get that cognitive assessment so that you know how your child's brain processes. So with that cognitive assessment, I can then use that as a baseline to work with concussion or to check out working memory or attention with regards to ADHD, or to check in with visual processing speed with dyslexia. So once I have that baseline, then I can work from that baseline to improve what needs to be with regards to concussions or dyslexia or ADHD. And it's very effective.
Can anyone perform the test, or is it specialized that you should make sure it's done by somebody special?
It has to be a licensed psychologist, a licensed or someone that's trained. I think licensed social workers can do it, but they have to be trained in it. But licensed psychologist or licensed educational psychologist have to give cognitive tests, and that's they're very clear about that, because you are getting an IQ score along with that, but you're getting a ton of other information that's much more important than that IQ score.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the IQ score. When I was a kid, a long time ago, it used to be heralded. I don't hear people talk about IQ scores as much anymore.
Well, I think a lot of people don't realize that an IQ test is simply measuring how the brain processes in certain areas. So when you're taking a simple IQ test, like a WISC-5, you're getting whether or not they have whether their verbal is strong or not, because you have vocabulary, right? And then you're getting their nonverbal skills. So we're looking, when I say nonverbal skills, I mean the skills like what we call fluid reasoning, which is problem solving, their internal, how they problem solve internally, those kinds of things. You're also getting working memory, which is where attention deficit shows up. And then you're getting visual processing speed to see how fast they can take in visual information and hold on to it. So that's basically what an IQ test is. It's looking at how the brain processes. And that last little score that comes out at the end is not nearly as important as all of those other scores. But now, since we have neuroplasticity and we know we can build all of that, all those scores, that IQ test is really just a baseline to move, up. So there's still a little controversy out there about that, but I think as more people understand that cognitive test is simply about how the brain processes and not about that little number at the bottom, I think people are starting to get it.
Well, and it's true, because if you look at a lot of the questions in the IQ test, especially a lot of them that are, following patterns and so forth, the more you do those, the more you understand the patterns, the more you see them, the better you're going to be at them. I mean, it's just natural. Right. I don't know why we didn't think that way before.
We didn't know the brain was plastic before.
People had a fixed mindset.
Yeah, exactly.
So I know these days ADHD seems to be a very touchy topic. It seems like everyone is quick to jump at it. I'm kind of the opinion, 5-year-old boys got ants in their pants. Partially, and then partially it's what do you feed your kids and how much sugar are they being pumped into before they're sent off to sit in a room all day. I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on the prevalence of ADHD that we tend to see in this country.
Well, there's definitely a lot of it out there. I mean, our kids are more distracted than they've ever been. I mean, think about all the different types. We have social media. There's bullying. There's drugs. There's tons of distractions out there for our kids. And so I think what's important is that parents probably realize that, or they need to realize that school begins in the home. The classroom begins that morning in the home, right? And if they have a routine and they get up in the morning and that they're able to have a calm breakfast and, then they're sent to school and they're, relatively peaceful and undistracted when they, and so I think that doesn't happen always, which I completely understand. But our students are already distracted by everything. So getting them to focus. When they go through the Brain Matters program, we have something called focus figures that they work on. And they start out doing it for 7 minutes. And by the end of the program, they're focusing on those for 20 minutes solid without talking. And I always ask them, when was the last time you focused on anything that wasn't a screen for 20 minutes? And they always say never. And so, but the only way to build that capacity is to practice it. And so, And I mean, attention is the secret sauce to everything, Rocky. Because if you can't pay attention to something, if you can't attend, then you can't retain. And if you can't retain it, you can't learn. So it's really important.
That it is. I'm thinking most parents are screaming at their kids because they're going to miss the bus, and everyone's, in that morning hectic rush of trying to get out the door and get things done. And I always say, the morning begins the night before. Do your stuff the night before, and then the morning falls into place.
Oh, you're reading my mind, Rocky. I can't tell you the number of times I've talked to parents about that.
How do they take it?
It's great. They're very receptive. They're like, anything that's going to help us, I love, by the time parents get to me, they're just like, please just tell us what to do at this point.
Maybe we'll have another show because, how did you learn how to parent? Because it's probably the same as how did you learn about money? Nobody taught us.
No, they didn't. But I think I learned those kinds of things again from sports, getting ready for the day before the game the next day, and how much preparation and pregame and, getting prepared. Because I think on the Golden Globes the other night, Tom Hanks said, what did he say? Being on time is a gift you give yourself, or something like that. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so true, because, to be on time, then you're giving yourself a moment to take a breath before you perform. You're being organized, you're just, those kinds of things are really important, I think.
We were just having this conversation yesterday morning. When I was a kid, being on time meant 10 minutes early. That was just what you were told. On time means you're 10 minutes early.
That's
and
right.
I think for most people in today's world, on time means you're there somewhat close to when it should be.
I know. In Oklahoma, time is a huge thing. So everybody, if they say that party starts at 7, everybody's there at 7. So when I moved out here to California, and they'd say, oh yeah, the party starts at 8:30, and I'd get there like 8:15. And the person wasn't even dressed yet. And I was like, what is happening here? And she said, in California, it doesn't mean the same as it did in Oklahoma.
And, and that same conversation was, the person said, he goes, my dad would say people are coming at 6 o'clock for dinner. And at 5 o'clock, he'd go sit by the window waiting for them. And if by 10:06 they weren't there, he said, oh, they must not be coming. And so off he would go. Now, mind you, they were invited for 6. So everybody showed up early, I guess. It's a different, every area has their own concept of what time is and what timeliness means. Exactly.
Like going to the airport, right? Like I would rather be way early and sit down and read a book, just, to reduce any anxiety. But then there are other people that just get there at the last minute and just fly through that airport. And I think, oh my goodness. So anyway, it goes right back to executive functioning skills, Rocky.
It does. So here's a thing I'd like to chat about. We tend to focus a lot on the lower performing students, but I think we're letting a lot of higher performing students, we're not doing enough to serve them well. And I know you said this earlier in the interview, you talked about as adults, we focus on our strengths and build onto our strengths. But if we just kind of I know the top 1% of kids probably get a lot of help, but once you get below that number, and from there to probably at least the halfway mark, I think we don't do very much to help these kids. What have you found?
Well, I think that's definitely the case in public school. Most of the kids that gravitate to me towards the Brain Matters program are these smart kids who have maybe one little thing that's not working optimally. So I don't. For some reason, the Brain Matters program hasn't really attracted that many students that are lower functioning, though it would work nicely with them. We have, that most of the students that come to us are very smart students that maybe are struggling a little bit with attention, or they're struggling with their processing speed or test anxiety, or maybe they want to raise their SAT and ACT scores. So in the schools, I think you're right. I'm not sure that they have the funding, set aside for the students who are doing well, obviously. But I do see a lot of those. And then in private schools, most of the private schools I work with are, they are looking at both. They are looking at both the students. They're looking at any of the students that need things, I think.
Well, that's good to hear. So we've been talking a lot about kids, but everything that we've talked about, I'd almost believe that it applies to adults too, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It sure does. I get a lot of requests to go into companies and work with their employees to optimize productivity or optimize, so we do cognitive testing, and then we take a look at that, and then we target those areas and work on those weaknesses, obviously. So, but adults, this program has been very successful for adults. I just get more of the young kids right now than I do the adults.
Is there an age in adults where it's too late?
I had a 97-year-old ex-CIA agent go through the program, and he was very happy at the end of the program. So I would say no. I don't work with anyone younger than 6 right now. I just haven't had a chance to get the preschool program ready to go. But we now know that neuroplasticity takes place at any age. So the brain is plastic, Rocky.
So you're never too old to learn.
Never too old. You may have to go through a few more hours than you did when you were younger, but you're never too old. Now, the difference is these kids are in school, so they're using these skills, right? Once they go through the program, they get back in school, they're using the skill like an athlete that's in season. Now, with adults, the difference is you have to maintain that. So they have to do the brain cards, and they have to do certain activities to maintain that because they're not in school. I would say that's the big difference.
And so I think that would be, and I don't know the science behind it, but I think as we age, we should probably go back and do the brain cards and do these types of things to continue to stay sharp. And I doubt there's studies that show how this would affect something like Alzheimer's or dementia or anything like that. But if we want to stay sharp, we've got to continually train.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's the brain is an important, it's the cockpit of the plane. And, it's what's driving us. So we definitely have to keep it sharp.
So what's the latest cutting edge research, or what are you hoping to see come out in the near future in regards to better utilizing our brains and improving them?
Well, what I would like to do is I would just like to see people doing brain training in the same way they do exercise and fitness. Now, we know that exercise is really important and helpful to the brain. But I would like to see that combination of things in the future. For a long time, exercise was not the thing, right? And then suddenly the research came out, and now it's, everyone's at the gym, or most people are trying to do something for their health. But, I don't see this. I would love to see this happening for some type of brain training that for not only for kids, but for adults in the schools. I think if they would put brain training in, there wouldn't be as much special ed if they would put that in those study skills classes. And I think that if they had brain training as students came in their freshman year to optimize those fundamental skills that are needed for learning, I think that you would see students moving in more positive directions and not so many dropouts. Those are the things that I would like to see, because this is this small program is makes such a huge impact on students and such a game changer that I just wanted more people to know about it, know it's out there. And I think I get that all the time from parents more than anything. How did I not know this was out there?
Well, and it isn't taught in schools. I know my daughter works for a company part-time that actually goes into schools and teaches kids how to better study, and has used certain types of skills that they have found definitely work. So maybe schools are more and more implementing it, but I think internally they don't have the structure and the ability to do it, with maybe the exception being private schools, because they have more flexibility in how they do things.
Right now. Yeah, and the Brain Matters brain training program is already in a couple of the private schools in California. They're already implementing it into their human development program. So it's not just the study of the brain, but then they turn around and do the actual brain training for the 20 hours, so that they're teaching the students why it's important, and then they're actually doing it with them. They're actually doing the brain training, which is just cutting edge.
And it's amazing that it's only 20 hours. 20 hours can make a big difference.
It's huge. So for visual processing speed, 20 hours can change it dramatically. 30 hours for working memory, attention, and auditory. So I always ask kids, if you could change your whole life in like 20 or 30 hours, would you do it? And they're like, yeah. So I know it is. It's minimal for the effects that you get.
Impressive. So we always like to take action every week. What is one thing people can do this week to take action?
Well, I would say that parents, especially, just again, here we're coming back to that paying attention thing. If parents are paying attention to a couple of the signs, a few of the signs with regards to their child, do they read for pleasure? Do they get really anxious before on a test taking day, or do they actually say they're sick on that day? And you know what I mean? So just paying attention to those little signs of what's going on, I think, goes a long way. And then looking at the possibility of doing that short 45-minute, an hour cognitive test with your child gives you so much information. But I would say paying attention first, and just see if there's anything going on in those little things, just those little things that parents can see, like, not reading for pleasure.
And I think that's excellent advice. Actually, looking back and thinking, I would almost be like, every parent should probably get their kid tested at some point, if just only to say, hey, you're really good here and you're pretty good here, but we could make you even better by spending a little bit of time over the summer working on some of these concepts. And it totally reduces the stress. I mean, that's what we always did with our kids over the summer. We'd go to the teacher and say, where'd they do well and where did they struggle? Okay, we'll work on the struggles all summer, so that when they come back in the fall, they'll be, at least they won't have forgotten everything and they will have moved forward. And it really helped to propel them forward. So it almost seems like every parent should get a good assessment of how their kids learn and where their strengths and weaknesses are, and then focus on helping to bring up both areas.
I think I say that constantly to parents, and we measure everything in our lives, Rocky. We measure our bank account, we measure our blood pressure, we measure the oil in our car. Are we just going to leave their brain to chance? We measure everything in our life. Why on earth would we not measure that? Just to get an idea of the baseline.
Absolutely. And as you said, we can constantly improve at any age. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
What's my secret to living an abundant life? Gratitude. I think gratitude is absolutely magic. Being grateful for the things that you already have, being grateful for in advance for the things that are coming into your life. So that's really important to me, gratitude.
And I think it's very important too. We have been blessed. Anyone listening to this podcast has been blessed with so much, and yet we don't appreciate it as much as we should until it disappears. You know, when the water stops flowing and the electricity goes off, you suddenly realize how blessed a life you have.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah, especially if the internet goes out, right? In most houses, that freaks everybody out. And 20 years ago, it didn't even exist.
That's true. It's true.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
That most everything is about maintenance. You know, most everything in my life is about maintaining things. You know, you have to maintain your relationships and maintain your health and maintain your fitness. And I think when I was younger, I was too busy seeing what else was out there, looking at the variety of things instead of looking at the things that were in my life that were good and then maintaining those. And so for me now to understand that maintenance is a huge piece of my life, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, our cars come with that maintenance manual. You know, every X amount of miles, you have to do this and you have to do that. And yeah, you have to maintain your body as well, and your mind and your relationships. And it's many of the things that we talk about on the show. Maybe we'll have to create a chart. Here's what you need to do and how often.
That's right. That's exactly right.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I think the wisdom would be when they need to make a decision, no matter what the decision is, to ask themselves one question. Is what I'm getting ready to do going to move me closer to my goals or farther away? And that's how you make a decision.
And the important thing there is, first of all, is know what your goals are, because otherwise you can't answer the question.
That's right. That's right. And, they definitely have to have some goals. But even if it's a small goal, I always tell students that, that's when, no matter what, you can ask yourself that one question and that will guide you.
Am I going in the right direction? Yep.
That's right.
Very much so. So if people would like to connect with you, learn more about the programs that you have and what you have to offer, what is the best way for them to do that?
Well, they can go on our website at Brain Matters with a Z, brainmatters.com. Okay, and they can do the submission form there, or they can call the phone number 831-917-3330 and get in touch with us. And I am constantly returning emails and phone calls and those kinds of things. So I'm happy to answer questions and talk with them anytime.
And thank you for sharing that. And we'll put them right into the show notes to make it easy for everyone to connect. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Rocky, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
I wish I had known a lot of this when my kids were little. Luckily, we've done a pretty good job and found our way. We also homeschooled our kids for the end of their portion of our job of schooling them on their lifelong journey of learning. Working at home with kids is not always easy, and we do have plenty of outside resources to support their learning. If your kids are doing well, they could be doing even better, and so could we. Life is a journey, and constantly learning and improving should be a foundational goal. This week's action step: pay attention to your kids' behaviors around learning. Reality is, each kid is different, so make sure you treat them differently. And check out the book on Mindset from Carol Dweck if you haven't already read that one. It's got some amazing insights for kids. I'm always available if you need to figure out how you're going to move forward in the current economic situation. So please do reach out. And you can always email me. I'm happy to answer questions. If you're still listening, you must have liked the episode, so please share it with a few friends. I'd appreciate that. You can also connect with me on the Facebook page or the Facebook group for Richer Soul. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to help build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals through coaching and accountability? Just email me. We can start with a short chat to see if we're a good fit for coaching. For many people, one session allows them to take a giant leap forward towards their dreams. You can always get me at rocky@richersoul.com. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I've shared has helped. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week and stay safe.